Hey everyone, welcome back to Beat the Sheet, an Xbox Game Pass challenge. The only podcast aiming to complete every single one of the now over 400 titles that have been made available on Xbox Game Pass since the start of 2020. As always, I'm your host Andy Wood, and I'm joined by my co-host Josh.
Hello, it's time to podcast.
It sure is. So, this week's show is brought to you by the letter B. We've got Blizzards and Birds in our new editions, and we've got Blobs and Boners in our Leaving Soon titles. It's going to be a crazy show of Bs today.
Thank you to the letter B for sponsoring the show. It's very good of you. We hope to get through the entire alphabet before this podcast comes to its untimely end.
Yep, you know, if you're in charge of other letters of the alphabet and you'd like to sponsor the show, just let us know. Reach out. We'll get that going. So, how has your week been this week, Josh?
Well, I finally did it, Andrew. After years of pressure in my head, after years of thinking to myself, I have to do it. I'm going to do it one day. I have finally bought a Sega Dreamcast. It was going to happen eventually.
Yes.
This has basically been threatening since the year 2000, when I saw the Dreamcast, and now I'm like, well, I need one. I must have one. And after 20 years of that being circling in my mind, I finally bought one with a copy of Soul Calibur Sonic Adventure and, strangely, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which I will probably play first because 20-year-old Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Who does not want to answer those massively out-of-date questions? That's going to be great.
That's just going to have added to the trivia in that game at this point, right? Like I'd much rather play that. Like it's gonna be great. I remember there was I was looking through some original PS1 games I owned before, and I had all the proper stuff, all the classics, the games people would actually want to play, and then just inexplicably a copy of The Weakest Link. And I was like, that's the one you want to play. You want to get some late 90s trivia on the go. That's a great call. But I mean, Dreamcast's always a good purchase. I caved on that in about 2012 or something, I think, because it just always seemed like such a cool console when I was a kid, but I just never felt like something I was going to realistically buy at the time. So yeah, good idea.
It's good, but I've got myself a big list of about 40 games I want to buy from it. There's some really weird games on the Dreamcast, man. So yeah, I'm looking forward to smashing through them in time. I've also managed to spend a little bit of time this week. Famously, I've not played any of the Halo franchise. So, I've only played Halo 5. So by proxy, that's the best Halo game in my mind, just to annoy everybody. But fortunately, I've decided this is getting silly. It's about time I played some more Halo. So I booted up a bit of Halo Spartan Assault. And that's probably my new favorite Halo game. So the spoilers, I've not finished it yet. But yeah, I think it's better than Halo 5. So for me, the Halo series goes Halo Spartan Assault, then Halo 5. Where the others will place, who knows? But for now, you heard it here first. Halo Spartan Assault, the best Halo game.
It's actually a good... Yeah, I thought it was quite a good little game. So that's the one that's fun, like a little twin-stick shooter deal, right? It's kind of...
Yeah, it's kind of good.
No, I agree. Playable. Yeah, no, good stuff. It's a perfectly fine game. It's probably not the best in the entire series of Halo, but nonetheless, that's an opinion. So that's nice.
How about you? What have you been up to this week?
Well, I've been busy with our new Leaving Soon titles. There's one in particular that is insultingly difficult, so that's been taking a lot of my attention. But as well as that, I've been playing the Destruction All-Stars game on PS5, which is, another one of these rare cases of an actual exclusive next-gen game, which is exciting. So spent a bit of time on that. It's, I love the old kind of Destruction Derby games, and I'm bad at it, but I really like Rocket League. And this kind of just smushes them together. It's not as good as that should be, but it's entirely fine. It's a good thing to mess around on for half an hour to an hour every now and then. There was a total kind of disaster in the first few days of the game. I think they've fixed it now, but they basically made it so that the microphone in everyone's PS5 controller was just automatically turned on for every match, and you could only turn that off by awkwardly going back to like your console dashboard and then muting the game room from outside of the game, which is just the most backwards way to do that ever. And it would happen again after every single match. So like every match you play is just full of people who have no idea their microphones are on, just talking to, other people in the room or talking about anything. It's like being on the freaking Handforth Parish Council every match. You don't know what's going on. Just a bunch of random nonsense happening. It's just just somebody shouting about reading the standing orders and understanding them. It's great. It's a magical time. But probably for the best they've fixed that and turned it off now because it was a bit of a disaster. But yeah, nonetheless, if you've got a PS5, fun little game to take a look at.
Oh, that hand for cowish pound sword joke, that's going to age like fine frubes by the time that, people listen to this in 6 months' time or something. Good God, they'll be like, what the hell does that mean?
I mean, I don't even know if that made it out of the UK either. So any international listeners, do look up Handforth Parish Council meeting because you're in for a treat there.
That's how the UK government works, if you want to know.
Absolutely. Right then, well, there's a lot to cover today, so let's get right into it.
Okay, so we have 2 new additions to the Xbox Game Pass service this week, and they are the Falconeer and Project Winter. 2 easy, simple little games. What did you make of this lineup, though?
Yeah, I mean, it's a quiet week, right? It's not a week that's going to be exciting a lot of people. But still, these are perfectly good Game Pass games in a lot of ways. The Falconeer was a Xbox Series launch title, which, it didn't get a lot of attention. It's a smaller game, an indie experience. So, didn't maybe have enough of a marketing push to really get its name out there. So it's always good for games like that to get a chance. And then Project Winter is an entirely multiplayer game. So always a big fan of multiplayer focused titles coming to Game Pass because common sense dictates you want to get those games in as many hands as possible to give them the best chance of success. So, it's two smart titles to come to Game Pass, but not a week that I think is going to be getting anyone too excited.
Yeah, I mean, you're completely right with multiplayer games. Put them in Game Pass because, there's nothing worse than buying a multiplayer game and then the audience is dead within a month. At least with Game Pass, in theory, unless you're Bleeding Edge or something, you will manage to gain some form of audience. And the Falconeer, yeah, it was strange how this game got almost routinely ignored, despite the fact it was a Series X and S exclusive. It is playable on backwards consoles as well. So, you don't need a Series console, but nobody seemed to particularly care about the fact that it came out, despite the fact there was very little else to really play on launch day. But yeah, that's probably why it's here now. 4 months later, it's had to delve into the murky paths of Game Pass, but that's no bad thing. It's a half-decent game. But before we get on to that, let's talk Project Winter. This is a nope game on the sheet because it's no completion, is there? How do you beat this sort of game? It's just however long you want to play it for. But you have the internet capabilities to enjoy a multiplayer friend game. I don't have those capabilities. So you just tell me if it's any good and is it better than Among Us?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, that's what this game is, right? It's an Among Us type game. Basically, there's 8 players in a match. Most of them are survivors, and their goal is to try and escape this kind of snowy mountain blizzard place. And a couple of players are traitors, and they have to, sneak around and, spoil the plans of the survivors. Maybe try and kill them if they get a chance to like find someone alone. And it does that in a perfectly serviceable way. It doesn't exactly feel like the most original type of game right now, but you could argue that the world probably would benefit from a couple more of these games, like if people are getting a bit tired of Among Us, it's another option. So that's pretty good. Obviously one of the things with these kind of games is they're entirely dependent really on voice communication. Like you're meant to be talking through the group. You're meant to be kind of questioning people. And if someone acts suspicious, you get on the comms and kind of talk to them about it. They'll plead the case and tell you they're not the traitor, even though they maybe are. That's kind of the whole point of this. And this game doesn't force voice chat, but it does bring up a very strongly worded message at the start, kind of implying it's pretty much essential. And in my kind of experience so far, I've played about 4 or 5 games of this, and every game seemed to have most of the people on voice chat. If definitely not all the people, but nonetheless, enough to get by, which is a good sign for this kind of game if you like, that kind of stuff. And surprisingly, not that many dicks so far. I expect kind of open season voice chatting games to just be full of the worst people in the world at this point. And it's actually been all right. It's been a lot of people, taking the game on board and actually trying to play it in the right way. So that's kind of fun. I would say I don't love the game itself here is the only problem. Like I said, the thing is you're a bunch of survivors and you go around and you have to fix up a couple of things. You have to fix up like a power station, fix up some equipment near the helipad, and then you call a helicopter to get out. And that's kind of how the game goes. But to do that, you have to kind of do like, there's like crafting elements. You have to go and punch trees and punch rocks to get like stones and twigs, and then craft those into components to help you fix stuff. And I don't like my crafting anyway. So having some crafting in this, it's just, I don't know. It's, yeah, not for me, really, that kind of stuff. And it's also just a little bit sluggish and clunky to play. The movement feels a bit slow and labored, and I guess it's meant to because you're on a snowy mountain and you're trudging through the snow. But yeah, it doesn't feel massively satisfying to actually play the game. The entire pull of this thing is the interactions you're going to have with the other players, right? That's the whole point of it. So in many ways, that's kind of okay. For me, I would say, if you love these kind of games, if you've been obsessed with Among Us for months and you want a new avenue to play that sort of game, then this is definitely worth a look. For me, though, I would probably only get enjoyment out of this if I actually played it with a group of friends. I don't know. I think the fun in these games comes from the fact that you're screwing over people you actually know, or like, you're working together with all of your friends to try and root out the one that's lying. That I think that just works better when you actually know everyone you're playing with. And I don't think it quite works as well when it's just a room of strangers. So yeah, it's a perfectly serviceable game. I think you'll probably already know if you want to play it before you even load it up. So that's pretty much all I've got on Project Winter.
Fair enough. I mean, did they fix those bugs and issues? Did you notice any? Because this game was meant to come out last week. They did delay it a week. Do you think the spit and polish helped? Have you noticed any clunkiness to the experience?
Yeah, no, it seems pretty smooth. There's no major issues I saw in the games I played. It all seems, perfectly, seems working well. It seems easy enough to understand. There's a solid tutorial there that kind of explains the principles of how to play the game and stuff. So yeah, it's, as a package, it seems pretty well put together, really. So whatever they needed to do in that week, they seem to have done it well.
And more importantly, did you get to be the imposter? Did you get to dick somebody over?
I did. So I did get to be the imposter. I played all of my games except one as the survivors, and I won a couple of those and lost one, I think. And then I played one game as the imposter person, and it was going okay. I kind of, I snuck around, and as I said, you sort of, you can, once they've like fixed a power station up or something, you can like sneak off and go and break it to kind of make it so they need to repair it again. So I'd gone off to do that. And then someone caught me like walking out of the place after it had been broken again. So then all the other players literally just circled me and kicked the shit out of me until I died. So that was kind of the end of it for me. But I tried to plead my case as well. I kind of walked out and then clearly noticed someone had seen me, and I was like, oh man, someone's broke the power station. and then yeah, they just kicked the shit out of me. So they clearly knew what was going on. But as I said, that kind of stuff is fun. Like, even if the game itself isn't the most enthralling, it's about those experiences and those interactions, and they are here. So yeah, it could be worth a look.
You may get the chance to kick one of the Beat the Sheet co-hosts. That's the real chance to play this game. Okay, let's move on from Project Winter. Let's move on to probably the main event of the week, the Falconeer. So this is a strange little game. It's an aerial combat game on a big bird. It's essentially like the giant birds from Lord of the Rings. They came in on big birds. Wasn't the big birds on that?
There's birdiness in there, yeah.
Imagine those big birds, but now you shoot guns and stuff like that. How did you find this? I played a little bit of this before being so bored I just physically couldn't play anymore. You've played a lot more than I have, but I hate aerial combat games. So you're perhaps a better judge of this sort of title.
Yeah, I've finished this game, so I'm done with it, which is nice for me. But yeah, so this is, despite the fact you're on a bird, this is a pretty traditional aerial combat kind of dogfighting game. You could replace these birds with like fighter jets and it would be the same game. That's just what it is. You fly around and you fight the other flying things. And for what it's worth, it does a fairly good job of that, I think. This is, to kind of preface this is a very small game. I think the entire development team for this was one person who did the programming and design of the game and one person who did the sound design, and that's it. So considering that, this, it handles well, the flying feels nice, the world looks perfectly nice in obviously a kind of low poly graphics way. It all looks pretty good. The water's quite nice as well. There's some really good effects on the water. So they've done a really good job with a lot of the fundamentals here, I think. The problem is everything surrounding those fundamentals, I think, kind of just falls apart in this game. Like, it's basically, it builds itself as an open world game, but you don't have any reason to explore the open world at all, and also the open world is a place that's 95% populated by water. So it's not going to be the most exciting thing to fly over. It's just the same water everywhere with the occasional tiny little building that you land on. So that's not great. And then also you kind of progress through the game by just jumping into these story missions. And as you go through those, you'll do like a chapter of the game as a certain faction. It's kind of, there's like these warring factions on different little islands in the place. And you'll finish a chapter, then you'll play the next chapter as one of the other factions and you'll do their story missions. So, you're jumping around between these different factions, but the game feels absolutely identical with every mission you play and every chapter you play. Nothing changes in this game. Every single mission is just fly to that place, shoot a few things in the air, and then fly home, and you've done the mission. With the rare, well, not even rare, with the quite frequent exception of missions where you fly to a boat, which is really slow, and then you have to escort that boat to the place, and then kill the enemies in the place with the help of the boat, and then you go home. That's it. Like, for the whole game, there's about 40 story missions. I've just told you what you do in every single one. That's the game. So, that just doesn't do enough to, like I said, to build on those fundamentals, to build on what is a perfectly enjoyable enough kind of flying around game. It feels nice enough to play, but there's no content. You just repeat the same thing for 10 hours until it ends.
I mean, the thing that absolutely killed me about the Falconeer is, as mentioned, I'm not a huge aerial combat fan, but the thing I enjoy about them the most is the sense of speed. The sense of that you're flying, you're zipping in and out, and you're in a full dogfight. The Falconeer is so slow. The core flying speed is just a crawl that you don't really get that excitement. You just feel like you're on just a big fat pigeon rather than a giant soaring eagle. And it's kind of disappointing. It doesn't hit those tones for me. I mean, the general dogfighting is okay. The bombing runs are a misery. It's a little clunky to actually pick up a bomb and then drop it. It's not perfect. Diving, any dive down is a bit of a nightmare in this game, and it does request you do it a little bit. And its checkpointing's a little iffy as well. If you do die, you will have to escort those giant boats all the way across the tired, endless sea all over again. That's kind of frustrating. That's kind of annoying. It lacks that visceral nature which like an Ace Combat provides. Ace Combat, which is on the actual Game Pass service, which is even worse for the Falconeer. There's a much better version of this sort of game already on the service. And beyond seeing it as a bit of an X&S showcase, it looks nice, to be fair. It runs smoothly. As you mentioned, the technical aspects of this game are pretty good. They're pretty solid. It's just lacking any enjoyment for me, any heart.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I really do. It's technically sound. As you said, it runs really nicely. This runs at 4K 60 on the X, but you can also run it at 120 frames, and it only drops to like 1800p. So it's only dropping a tiny bit from 4K to do 120, and it's super smooth at 120. I really enjoyed playing it at that, but obviously it can only do that because it's not a particularly technically demanding game, but nonetheless, that's really cool. I hope to see more indie games, kind of push the frame rates to the limit and play in 4K and stuff. I think it's something that they are uniquely able to do, whereas big AAA games, you kind of have to pick one or the other, right? Resolution or frame rate. So nice that it does that. It's also got some pretty nice enemy designs, I think, as well. Like, there's some cool variation in the different factions in this game. Some groups have like blimp-like airplane things that fight you, whereas another faction will just come in on like a big giant ugly worm. Some people have like flying manta rays that shoot lasers at you and stuff. There's good variety there again. And if anything, though, that just all builds up to make it a bit more disappointing that there's nothing here that differentiates itself from the first 20 minutes you play the game. You've seen the game after that time, and it's basically a decision at that point of, do you want to keep playing that 20 minutes again for 8 hours, or do you want to check out? And I think most people are going to check out, sadly.
I mean, I checked out pretty much after my second hour finished, and I went, that will do. I'm not touching this again until it enters leaving soon. I was actually worried about playing too much because I'll forget how to play it and I'll have to redo the bit I've already done. So I was very cautious not to go too far with it. One thing that did strike me, though, one thing that was irking me, is this game's dialogue is really overblown. It's really overwrought. It's overwritten to the extreme at times. It just feels nonsense. It's throwing out all these gobbledygook sort of sermons and morals and nonsense tedium Does that continue pretty much throughout the game? Because that was really getting on my nerves pretty much 2 hours into it.
Yeah, so I'd made an early note of that in this game, that I was just completely failing to connect with this world because of that reason. It's very overblown and over the top, and they don't really go into any detail on why anything is happening. They just try and, as you said, kind of throw sermons at you until you just somehow understand. And they do keep that going for most of the game. You kind of learn as the game goes on that all of these different factions that seem to be fighting, like, they all have a different understanding of this big issue to do with their world, and that all comes together in the final act. But the problem is, I wasn't invested enough to really care at that point. Like, they didn't do a bad job of bringing it together at the very end of the game, but they don't do anything to build up any interest before then. So, you're already lost by then, really.
It's a shame. I think there's things to like here, and if you're an aerial combat fan, you'll probably get a lot more out of it than I did. There's not too many of this particular genre about. If you're into it, you'll be all over the Falconeer, and you probably will get a heck of a lot more out of it than I will. I am not going to score it because I've not really played enough to score it. That'll come when it leaves Game Pass in a year's time, 18 months' time, whenever that will be. But you finished it, so what did you end up giving this out of 10?
Yeah, I end up giving this a 5 out of 10. As I said, it's fundamentally sound, it's technically sound, but there's just not enough content there. There's not enough variation in the mission design at all. It's a real problem. And yeah, so 5 out of 10. But I would say as well, as I said before, this was developed and designed by one person. Like, he's clearly done a really, it's a fantastic effort to get those fundamentals as sound as they are here by a single developer. That's really commendable effort. I'd like to see him part of a team with enough people to really flesh the content out in his next game, because if they can bring a few more people in, they could be onto something here.
Okay, so moving on. We move on to our leaving soon games, and we have 3 games which are leaving the Xbox Game Pass service very soon. So leaving on the 15th of February, we have Blob and Ninja Gaiden 2. And leaving on the 16th of February, for some unbeknownst reason, is Shadows of the Damned, which is also the first title to leave EA Play, which is interesting because I didn't think games would, because don't they own them all? I don't understand.
They do own them all.
How does this happen? Why are they not? They own their own games. Surely they don't have licensing problems with their own games. But anyway, it is going, it is leaving. So those 3 titles will be leaving in the next week. We have played already The Blob and Shadows of the Damned, so we're going to talk about them this week, and Ninja Gaiden 2 next week. But what did you make of this lineup of pretty old games, may I add? I think the youngest one here is Shadows of the Damned, and that came out in 2011. So God help us.
Yeah. As you said, this is a big old list of games. For the most part, for me, this list wasn't bad because I'd already played The Blob and Shadows of the Damned. But even though I've already played those 2, Ninja Gaiden 2 is an insanely difficult game. It's a game that I briefly tried to play when it came out in, I think, 2008, and it just kicked my ass, and I got sick of it and stopped playing. So it's actually, even though there's only one game I need to beat, it's still going to be a real challenge to beat that one game. So that's a problem.
Yeah, I think I got about halfway through this in 2008, and I just gave up because I was going to start crying. So I'm looking forward to starting crying very soon when I do start it. I had to play The Blob for this week's show. I haven't played The Blob. Let's go into that now, because The Blob is the culmination of what is 13 years of me desperately trying to not play this game. I remember seeing it advertised for the Wii. I remember it being reviewed pretty well for the Wii. And it was at a time when I'd buy any Wii game if it got anything above a 6. But even then, I just didn't want to play The Blob. I had no interest to play this game. So it's finally caught up to me. Game Pass, you've done it to me at last. And I have played The Blob. But what did you make to kick us off of this bizarre color me in adventure, essentially?
Yeah, so The Blob, I kind of was similar to you in that it was always something that I just never wanted to play. But I had a weird moment about a year ago where I ended up just downloading it and playing through it on Game Pass. And during the process of doing that, I noticed that for some reason this game was just inundated with 5-star reviews on the Xbox reviews platform. So, I mean, I don't even know if they're still there, but I found these at the time and made a note of them because they're just amazing. So I'll run us through a few quick reviews of The Blob before we do our own review, which might not be quite as glowing. So let's see, right? Review 1 was simply titled, "Why Did She Leave?" And this review says, "Me and Karen had a divorce, and even Bob the Builder couldn't fix it. But did Blob save my marriage?" So that's a good review. That's a positive recommendation there if you have marriage troubles. Uh, Review number 2. "I love this game, and my dog learned how to play it, and now he is #1 player in world." So again, good option for pets out there who need a game in the next 2 weeks before it leaves. And finally, we have, "I was scrolling through Game Pass, bored of all the other games, and suddenly my eyes feasted upon this magnificent artwork of gaming. It was love at first sight. I deleted all my other games for this one. I've not stopped playing the Blob, and my family are getting concerned, but I am fine as long as I have the Blob to keep up my spirits." So
God, I
yeah.
hope that guy wasn't playing it on Game Pass.
Well, I am. Well, I think he said he was. He was. Yeah.
Oh no.
He said he was scrolling
That
through
poor
Game Pass
man.
bored. Oh God. Right. Yeah. Somebody, if you are that man or know him, reach out to us. We need to help him because he's in real trouble. Hopefully they'll add the Blob too as this leaves. Although, please don't.
Let's
don't
hope
do,
they don't.
Don't do that. Someone just send this man to Blob. He'll be fine. But yeah, so some good positive reviews there. And I thought, yeah, sure, let's give the Blob a go. And yeah, I mean, as you said, yeah, this is really just a weird color me an adventure. It's just about a 3D platformer, I suppose. You could stretch to say it is one. But really, the goal of the game is just to, you just run your blob through some color, and then you go over like all the walls and buildings and they turn that color. And after you've done enough of that, they say, right, you've done enough now. You can go to the next level. And then you do that about 11 times to beat the whole game. And that's about it, really, isn't it? There's not a lot to the Blob.
No, the Blob's a very simple game with admittedly quite a fun premise. I like the idea of this game. So essentially the story of the Blob, it has the story. The story is that there's an authoritarian regime. They want the world in black and white. They've sucked all the color out of the world. You ain't going to you're not going to stick around for that. You're the Blob. And you're just going to run through a load of paint cans, splash it all over the buildings, splash it all over the enemies, and bring color and life back to the world. That's actually quite a nice idea. It's also quite a nice premise that, the uprising of people against authoritarianism. All very nice. Lovely, lovely, lovely. But ultimately, that gameplay idea is satisfying for all of 3 levels before repetition and tedium really does start to kick in. And this is the Blob's kind of killer, essentially. It doesn't do enough with its idea. It doesn't iterate upon it enough to ever hold somebody's attention beyond the first couple of levels. And you can kind of see that just in the achievement completions. Like, you see the first 2 or 3 worlds have like 50% of players, 30% of players, 20%. And then it just dies down to like 2% of players getting through level 5, dropping to like 0.8% of players finishing the game, of which we are 2 of those sick freaks who have done that, and that dog dude. But, this is kind of it. A lot of players will have picked this up thinking that it's actually could be an easy little, play it for 5 minutes kind of time. But ultimately, even if doing that, you're going to get a bit bored of it.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the failings here is that, so there's all these different missions, you're trying to battle against this inked corporation who are sapping all the color out of the world. And you go to different areas, which, to their credit, they all seem fairly original and differently designed to the previous one. Obviously, they're all in black and white till you color them in, so there's not a ton of life there, but that's the whole point of the game. But the problem is that for every level, you're basically just trying to score some points until you can open the gate to get to the next world. And to do that, they just give you these kind of like just identikit generic missions. Like, you'll go to a mission marker and it'll say, here's a line of buildings, color all these ones green. And then you'll go to the next marker and it'll say, here's a different line of buildings. We want these ones red. And you just keep doing that over and over again until you get enough points to move on. And that's just not interesting enough to carry you through what is a fairly long little game. I think this took me about 8 or 9 hours at the end to get through all these levels. It's not short. So to just be doing that kind of same mission structure for all that time does drag a lot.
And credit to the missions where they say paint this row of houses green, and then you go to the very next mission objective and it's paint those exact same row of houses purple. And you just go, God, I just did that, dude. Do I need to do it again, but now in a different color? They do that all the time. As you mentioned, there's not many variations here. You'll either paint things, stamp on things, or race along a course against a time attack, which you couldn't fail even if you turned the Blob off. It's that that's that simple of a time marker. I mean, the game's not trying to be challenging, to be fair. On the whole, it's embracing that. There are alternate modes you unlock once you beat the main level, which are significantly harder and significantly more time pressure. Though I don't quite understand why the main story missions are against a timer, because the timer doesn't really come into play. And it kind of just hinders the idea of you just going to explore for no real reason. It's not necessarily, doesn't really need to be there. I don't really understand why it's there beyond to prepare you for potential time trials should you decide to play more of it later. But who the heck is playing 10 levels of the Blob and saying, well, I want more of that? It's just a little strange to me.
No, I agree. The decision to put a timer on every level is a very strange one, particularly because you never really get near running out of time. The only reason you would get near running out of time would be if you were trying to be a completionist and collect everything. And you like, as a, from a game design standpoint, why would you want to limit people from doing that anyway? Like if you're going to put timers on the levels, at least make them quite difficult timers, and then you force the player to rush and speed through the level to beat it, and then maybe they can go back in and explore afterwards. Whereas this is just the worst of both worlds. It's too slow of a timer to give you any, bring any intensity and kind of rushing to the game, but also it makes it so you can't really explore and take your time as much. So yeah, not a big fan of that. But to go into some things that I do like about the Blob, because I actually think it's a decent enough game. I do think that the Blob is largely enjoyable to control. He's quite well animated, he's a blob. So, you kind of if you push him against things or walls, it reacts quite satisfyingly to that. The game's got some pretty good sound design as well. It does some really cool stuff with the music where it has a constant soundtrack, but it really it kicks in as you paint things. So you kind of get extra jazz riffs as you start painting walls and stuff. And I think that's clever and quite nice. So, I think actually, moving around and controlling the game and experiencing it largely is quite enjoyable. It's just, if you try and cram too much of this into a small time, the fact that every level is the same really does start to grind you down.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I'll say that I didn't quite have the same joy control in the Blob as you did. I actually found the fact he'd stick to walls whether you want him to or not to be quite annoying. He'd have the horrible habit of you trying to just paint in a wall and then all of a sudden you're stuck to it and you jump off. And you can kind of see where the Wii controls were in it, because I imagine you'd flick him off the wall to move to the next one with the Wiimote. And there's relics of that control scheme in here, which aren't really necessary on a control pad. There's elements where you need to pump a building through of color, and you quite clearly were waggling your Wiimote like a madman to do it in 2008. But nowadays, you're just slamming a button 100 times to fill a building, and that's kind of dull. It's kind of boring. Maybe they could have just gone for a hold down approach, just to kill that sort of thing. But none of those little niggles. On the whole, I agree with you on the sound. I think the sound design is fantastic. I think the score is pretty good on the whole. There's lots of different riffs you can play each level with, and as you mentioned, as you paint more buildings, as you stamp on enemies, you might get a big hi-hat slam onto the drum kit, which I kind of like. Levels build up as your momentum increases, the music might get a bit faster. If you slow down, the music will slow back down with you. If you go into a black and white area and do nothing, it just dies to a halt. It's clever. It does that very, very well, and that's the most enjoyable part of the game. And there is a general calmness to just going around, painting buildings, ticking off the little mission objectives. It's fairly easy to do. And I completed the first 3 levels to 100%, and I thought I was going to do it for the entire game until I just physically couldn't keep doing it. I just got too bored. It was just too much. It's not a game to rush through. It's a game you should really just play a mission of, maybe a mission a day, and then just put it down. I couldn't play more than 3 missions at a time in this because I wanted to cry if I forced myself through too much the Blob. But, on the whole, it's not a bad game. It's a 3D platformer. It's a collectathon platformer, essentially, at its core. And it kind of plays like a 2008 platformer. There's not a lot of invention here. There's not a lot of tricky jumps you need to nail. You just play through it, you'll win it, you'll never die, and you'll have a good time. It's perfectly acceptable. Quick shout out, though, to the cutscenes. The cutscenes are fantastic, by the way. They're really funny. They've got a lot of personality and soul to them. But for some unbeknownst reason, they did not update them to HD. So they're these really standard def cutscenes where you can tell it was a Wii game. and then the actual world itself is in HD. I don't know why they couldn't do that, why they couldn't upgrade these to an actual HD sheen, but I just found it a little bit odd that they didn't do that, because the cutscenes are great.
Yeah, and I agree. Actually, yeah, it is particularly jarring when they just come through in such weird low quality. But I mean, I don't know why did they lose the, the source files for them or something? They just had to like scrub them out of the old version of the game. I have no idea, but nonetheless, it's definitely a bit strange. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much everything I've got on the Blob. Like I said, I think I mean, obviously this isn't ideal for a game leaving Game Pass because I think this game's at its best when you just do the odd level every now and then when you feel like it. I don't think there's any joy to be had by rushing this out in the next week or so, really at all. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. But yeah, I think if it's a game that you own and you just play a level every now and then, it's decent enough. It's all right. So I end up giving it a 6 out of 10 in the end.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I ended up giving this a 5. It's just a little bit too repetitive and a little too tedious for me at this stage in my life. So I will say, if you're a listener with children, I think this is a great children's game. It's really easy to control. There's like 2 buttons you press at all times, along with the analog stick. So you'll pick it up in a heartbeat. And I think kids will love just splashing paint around the world and bringing this place to life. I think it's a great kids game. So if you do have children that are looking for an easy platform with a good message and a good spirit, definitely buy this game. If you're a miserable 30-year-old fatso like me, maybe don't give it a go. It's probably not for you. I give it a 5 out of 10. Yeah.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I completely agree with that sentiment. I do think this is a fantastic kids game. It's one to buy for sure if you've got young kids who would get something out of that.
Okay, let's move on to our next game of the week, and it's Shadows of the Damned. Now, long-term listeners will know that I built this up as a bit of a hidden gem in the Xbox 360 back catalogue in an old video we did about bringing games to Game Pass from the Xbox 360. And then, of course, it came via EA Play a few months later. So the opportunity is now here to do that. Do give this game a go. It's got a dream team behind it of Suda51, Shinji Mikami, and Akira Yamaoka, the Silent Hill composer. So yeah, there's a lot to enjoy here. What did you make of this, though? I mean, if you're anything like me, you played it a long time ago, so you're going to have to try and remember it.
Yeah, I played this when it came out because, like you said, that team, you got Suda51 from No More Heroes, Killer 7 fame. Shinji Mikami, the creator of Resident Evil, is producing this game. And then, yeah, composed by the Silent Hill composer, Akira Yamaoka. That's a stunning team of people. I am, of course, going to be buying that game as soon as it comes out, which is what I did. So, yeah, I mean, this is a great little game. It's just obviously been a challenge to remember everything about it, but I've spent some time with it again this week and I've kind of got a feel for what it was again. And yeah, I really like this game. It's a really good action game. It's aged fairly well. I don't think it's particularly jarring to play these days. Shares quite a lot of similarities with Resident Evil 4, as you would expect with Mikami being involved. But maybe a bit more action-packed. For example, the combat in this game feels very Resident Evil 4, except for the fact you can actually move in this game where you can't move in Resi 4. So it's got a lot of those similarities. But yeah, this is just a really good action game with some simple puzzle-solving elements as you go through. It's got a really cool kind of retro horror feel to it. It's very, very grindhouse kind of 80s stuff. You basically go to the underworld to save your girlfriend who's been taken by the king of the underworld. And yeah, it's good stuff.
It is good stuff. And I was trying to remember the game and what I liked about it. And bizarrely enough, I wrote a review about this game 10 years ago. I remember writing it down in a blog post. I wanted to be a journalist at the time. I'm a journalist now. And I used to review every game I played. And so I thought I'd try and dig through my archives, see if I could find this review. And I actually did. So you could find it yourself if you're that much of a determined listener. I'm not going to give you any clues. Good luck. But I managed to find it. And yeah, basically, I kind of knew a lot of those sentiments. It was old me, 21-year-old me, basically loved the fact that this was Resident Evil, but with slightly more fluid controls. You could move about a little bit more. You know, you weren't stuck to the spot. You could actually play it more seriously, more enjoyably. But I also praised at the time the light dark mechanic in this game. So one of the big things this game does is that it shrouds things in darkness and you need to fire a light to illuminate the area, otherwise the underworld will drag you down into its murky pits and just devour you at will. And it's kind of similar to the Alan Wake light dark mechanic in that game, where if an enemy is shrouded in darkness, you need to fire a light bolt at them before you can kill them. If a room is shrouded in darkness, you need to fire it at, of all things, a goat's head, because it's a Suda 51 game. So of course you need to fire it at a goat's head. But I think the thing that people will remember from this game, the thing I remembered from it 10 years on, irrespective of an old review I managed to dig up, is the banter between the two lead characters. So you play a character called Garcia, and he has a gun/demonic buddy called Johnson. So Johnson is his big gun. And if that sounds like a dick joke, it's because it is a dick joke. And Shadows of the Damned is so full of dick jokes, it's almost ridiculous.
It is absolutely overspilling with dick jokes. They are everywhere in this game.
It's just kind of over the top. It's very silly. It's very juvenile, and it's really juvenile. I loved it 9 years ago. I probably still love it now because I'm a big child. But you have to be on board with the fact that it's just going to be a load of boner jokes. It's going to be a load of Big Johnson jokes. Even the Lord of the Sodding Underworld's called Fleming, and he's got he always speaks in sexual innuendo, even just from the opening cutscene. He's just drenched in sexual innuendo. The game is chock full of it. And it's kind of funny for that. Suda loves that sort of stuff. I would say, though, that if you are a Suda 51 fan, and I'm a huge fan of Suda 51, I love the work he does. This is pretty tame by his standards. This is not off-the-wall bizarre. This is got EA's fingerprints all over it, in that it's a lot more mainstream. It's a lot more streamlined. There's not too much bizarre stuff going on here, like you're having No More Heroes, for example, even more so Killer 7. This is a more restrained version of Suda, and I don't know how you found that.
I mean, I think if anything, that might well just be the influence of having Shinji Mikami producing this game, reining him in to some extent, because Suda games in the past have been, and I know you're a massive fan of Suda, and I've enjoyed some of his games, but they do go off the rails to the point where you either manage to go with it and you have a great time, or you kind of just lose touch with it a bit. And I know that I lost touch with No More Heroes. I was enjoying it for a time, and I just fell off it in the end because I don't know, it just lost my attention. It just went a bit too zany and crazy by the end. So I don't know if it's just having someone, a more experienced hand who's, spent years on the Resident Evil franchise, maybe just reining him in a little bit. And, I like it. I think this comes out as a kind of more cohesive package, maybe, to do another dick joke than his other games. So yeah, I wasn't too concerned by that. But again, I'm not kind of as big of a Suda fan as you are. Yeah,
I suppose your mileage will vary when it comes to Suda 51. There are still touches of his, like, for example, you recover health by drinking alcohol. You force feed babies' heads strawberries to level up. That's kind of weird, even by Suda standards. Obviously, they're shooting a light at a goat's head. Yeah. There's these weird bedtime stories that play before every single boss fight, which kind of foreshadows why that boss is like it is. They're really twisted and bizarre. Yeah. And the whole game turns into a side-scrolling shooter right at the end of its runtime for absolutely no reason. And a 21-year-old me didn't like that. He thought that wasn't particularly good. But I think 30-year-old me would quite like that section.
That sounds right up 30-year-old Josh's street, to be honest.
Maybe the 10 years have been kinder to me in the side-scrolling shooter world. So I'd quite enjoy that. But back then, I didn't care for it.
Yeah, I remember as well, I mean, you were saying about the kind of the elements of wacky Suda stuff in this game. And as well as the obviously intense amount of dick jokes, of which there are many. I mean, I wrote some quotes down here, including stuff like, there's a point where Johnson tells you to fill those cracks in with your explosive hot boner. There's a point where you need to upgrade your gun, so Johnson calls a sex line to change himself into Big Boner, and the gun physically grows bigger. And then your character holds the gun with in his crotch and shouts, "Taste my big boner" to the bad guys he shoots at. Stuff like that is in here. There's a point in this where you, as a platform, you walk over the ass of your nude girlfriend for some reason. She's just a big nude girl platform, and you have to walk up her to get to the next area. I think it's fair to say it's got a fair amount of Suda nonsense in it overall.
Oh yeah, there's definite elements of raunchiness and silliness to it. And if you don't have a tolerance for that, you won't like Shadows of the Damned. But if you do have that juvenile streak to you, and you want to play a very linear, it's an incredibly linear video game. third-person shooter with a lot of personality, a nice art style. It's kind of got like a pastel-y kind of color to it. It's slightly off. It looks kind of interesting. In motion, it plays really nicely. And with a fantastic score as well by Akira Yamaoka. It's kind of strange. It's not really his normal kind of work. There's a lot of Spanish guitars over it. There's a lot of heavy metal riffs. But there's also the standard level music, which can slip into horror occasionally, though this isn't really a scary game. There's too many jokes. There's too much banter. There's too much silliness going on for it to ever be scary, unless you're terrified of dick jokes, in which case run a mile.
This would not be for you then. I agree. I mean, this is a game where you're too powerful for it to be scary, right? Like, it's not, I mean, you can even go right back to where I said that it's like Resident Evil 4, except for you can move when you shoot. Being able to move when you shoot is a big difference maker there. You know, like Resident Evil 4 is a game where, you know, if you're not careful, some big guy with a chainsaw is going to rip your head off, and it's very difficult to do anything about it because you have to stand still to shoot at him, and, you know, stuff like that. Whereas this game, you never feel that vulnerable. You know, you've got your guns, you've got your big boners, your explosive boners, and you're just tearing through everyone with those. And it's fun for that. You know, it's not trying to be a scary game. It's trying to be a action game with a horror kind of aesthetic to it, and it succeeds at that.
I'd have loved to have seen the faces of the EA bosses when this game was put in front of them, because there's no way in heck this game was ever going to sell particularly well. It's too weird. It's too off the wall. I mean, it's so completely un-EA. If you look through the EA Play lineup, it sticks out like a massive
probably why it's leaving.
thumb. It's probably been kicked out of the party because it got drunk and it made a scene. Let's be honest. That's the kind of game Shadows of the Damned is, essentially. And I love it for that. And I think it's a really good title, a real good throwback to the days of a slightly more arcadey third-person shooter. It's a very good time. It's full of humor and life and fantastic monster design and creature design and world design. It's all there. It's not my favorite Suda game. It's not a patch on No More Heroes, for example, but there's a hell of a lot to like here, and I think people should definitely give this a go before it leaves. I think it's well worth a playthrough.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I mean, it's not even that long of a game either. You'll be done with this in about 7 or 8 hours. And even just for, you know, as we said at the start of this, that dream team lineup of like Suda, Shinji Mikami, and Akira Yamaoka on the composing duties, that's, you know, if you have any kind of long-standing interest in you know, game development and kind of, you know, famous game developers like those people, then by all means you should definitely check this out and just take a look at, you know, what they've all managed to create here, because it's definitely got a lot of unique properties to it, that's for sure.
It certainly does. Okay, so I ended up scoring this an 8 out of 10 from memory. In the past, I scored it an 8.8 out of 10 because I was apparently grading on the 100-point scale at those times. So I loved it back in the day, so maybe I'd love it even more now. Who knows? I haven't had the chance to replay it due to the fact I have to beat the entirety of Xbox Game Pass. But yeah, it's a really good game, and do try and find my article. Good luck with that.
Yeah, that's fair. I sadly didn't write a giant review for this a decade ago, so I've had to go off my kind of memories of the game and looking up a good bit of footage of it now. I would have loved to play this again. As you said, if we didn't have to beat all of Game Pass, I would have been completing this week, because it's a really just cool game to go back and check out. But yeah, in light of all that, I've gave this a 7, which, you know, maybe I'm being harsh. You'd have to ask me from 10 years ago. But yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. All right, then. So to close out the show, we've got a fair bit of news going on this week. So let's open this up with the first story, which is that there is a PlayStation Studios game coming to Xbox, which is a thing that has never happened before. So that's kind of cool.
What's it going to be? Is it something good? Is it something exciting? Are they sending over Horizon? Are they sending over Miles Morales, maybe? A bit of Spider-Man license? Are they sharing at last? What's it going to be? What's the game?
One of those big hitters, you know. It's a series that I'm sure will have a ton of fans here in the UK. It's MLB The Show, the baseball game. So,
I mean, that is a big hitter, to be fair. That's a baseball expression, right? Big hitter.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
expression.
I think they've been hitting several home runs with this game's series for many years now. So it's a big addition to Xbox. But yeah, look, I mean, we don't know a lot about baseball over here. It's just not really a thing that anyone does. But, you know, MLB is a big franchise. It's a big thing, particularly in the US, obviously. So yeah, this is good stuff. I mean, it's good that Xbox are going to be getting a proper baseball game. There hasn't been a licensed baseball game on an Xbox console since, I mean, I literally can't remember any, so it's definitely been a long time. This is coming in April 2021, so not very long to wait either. So yeah, definitely really good news for sports fans, good news for baseball fans who, are stubbornly sticking to Xbox, even though the PlayStation's had these titles now for a long time. And yeah, all good news. Obviously, it's not some mad PlayStation game that we would all be clamoring for, maybe. But to be honest, I'm pretty sure that there's no official word on this story, but I think it makes the most sense by a mile here, which is that it seems as though MLB basically gave Sony the option of, we want a Major League Baseball game on the other platforms. Do you want to make it for us, or should we shop this license out to someone else? I think that's clearly what happened here, because Sony aren't the type to be, throwing their games on Xbox. And I mean, this is coming to Switch as well. So it's, it's going to be on Nintendo platforms as well. And that's not a decision they'd just make for the good of their health. I have to think this is an MLB decision.
I find it baffling that a sport as big as baseball, and it is a massive sport, of course, in the States, would not have a licensed property across all of the video game platforms. I find that mind-boggling, because I regularly saw MLB The Show as one of the top reviewed games on Sony consoles for years.
Yeah.
Like, this is pretty much meant to be the best sports franchise you can play. It's better than FIFA, it's better than NBA, it's better than NHL. All those franchises can't touch The Show. This is the best sports game to play. So it is a hell of a coup, to be fair, for those who do love the sport. It's not going to have a lot of cut through the European audience, obviously, for us. But if this came to Game Pass, I'd be all over this. I'd definitely want to give this a go. I imagine a baseball game would be pretty fun. I played Mario Baseball. Does that count? And that was pretty good.
That's the same.
That was all right.
It's totally the same
thing, right?
But yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I would absolutely give this a go if it was on Game Pass. I mean, I think it might be a bridge too far to think a Sony Studios title will come to Xbox Game Pass. I think that might be the bridge that does not get crossed here. But nonetheless, as you said, I think, you said it's baffling that such a big thing as MLB wouldn't have games on the other platforms. And I imagine that's what the kind of higher ups at Major League Baseball have kind of realized here. They've probably thought, why is this not on, like the Switch in particular, with the amount of units the Switch is selling? They must have been thinking, why are we not on these things? And, now they are. So that's good news. Yeah, I wouldn't expect this to, there's a lot of internet chatter about like how, maybe Microsoft owes Sony a favor now, so they'll bring some games across. Like, this is a deal made completely in isolation. Don't get excited about any potential. You ain't getting Halo on your PlayStation 5 and stuff. And there's a lot of people saying that this makes it more likely that Elder Scrolls 6 will come to the PS5, and Elder Scrolls 6 might come to the PS5, but it will be completely unrelated to this. This is it's clearly just a business decision made between MLB and PlayStation Studios. It has nothing to do with the other platforms as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'd be amazed if we see any Xbox games coming up. If there had to be some quid pro quo, they're probably going like Fusion Frenzy or something, just as like an absolute dig. Oh, you gave us a show, did you? There's Fusion Frenzy. Enjoy. So yeah, don't expect anything back.
No, I agree. One thing that is interesting about this, though, and I wonder what your thoughts are on it. How do you think this is going to play on the Xbox Series consoles? Like, because you could argue that the Series X is the most powerful console, even though we keep seeing kind of differing results between PS5 and Series X. Like, do you think there'll be any underhandedness here? Like maybe attempts to run it slightly worse on the Series X so that the PS5 comes off looking better in like Digital Foundry reports and stuff like that?
I mean, if they do, I hope they go whole hog and they just make it look like an N64 game. And going, this is all this can run. What is this?
On the Series X, this game's in 2D.
Look at these giant sprites. These are terrible. Oh, God, look at the polygons. You can count them. Oh, that's what I hope they do. I hope it's an N64 game they're going to just throw out. That'd be hilarious.
Runs at like 1 frame a second. It's just like, God, that's so awful. What a stupid console. But yeah, I mean, we'll see anyway. But as I said, yeah, definitely good news for sports fans. Always good that these kind of games are available to more people, I think. So all happy there. So yeah, anyway, moving on then. Next story. We have news this week that Warner Brothers have finally patented their Nemesis system, which is a mechanic they used in their Middle-earth games, Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. Apparently, they've been trying to patent this for a long time, and they finally managed to push it over the line. I really only put this in to just talk about how much I hate that this is a thing that's happening. I hate the idea that a game mechanic, this, because like for people who don't know what the Nemesis system is, it's basically it's a way that the AI works in that game, so that the enemies, which in this case are orcs, they all kind of have distinct personalities, and they'll just interrupt the player while he's doing different missions. But they also remember what happened to them before. So if the player beats them up, they might come back next time with like injuries, or maybe they've been demoted in the kind of orc hierarchy. And the player can also take control of some of the orcs and help them rise up the chain of command to become like higher up orcs. It's a really clever system which has been completely underused, and it will continue now to be underused since apparently Warner Brothers are making it so nobody can use it. And yeah, I hate the idea of being able to put a pattern in for something so kind of conceptual. Like, it's not, this isn't a physical product. It's literally a small aspect of a game, and I'm just not a fan of that.
Yeah, this boggles my mind, to be honest. I don't really understand how this can be patented. It's just a game system essentially. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not like a concept or an IP or anything. It's just something within a game. But if they want to do it, whatever. I think the Nemesis system, even they can't find the best use for it. It was pretty underused in Warner Brothers games. So if you want to bypass the patent by creating something like it but good, that would be quite nice, because I'm not a massive fan of those Shadow of Earth games. I think they're pretty average. Partly hurt by the fact that Warner Brothers themselves are just a scummy company, pumping microtransactions and absolute nonsense into the system. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting precedent, but I think you'll struggle to see them actually successfully sue somebody off the back of this.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but it's just the fact that it's a deterrent at this point, right? And it also makes me wonder if this is why they haven't been using it. If they've been wanting to get this through before they try and find new spins on that formula. But yeah, I mean, it's just a bad practice. This isn't the first time that the game elements have been patented. I remember there was one for the longest time that was much more minor, but it was a Namco patent, which was about putting their retro arcade games in loading screens, so they could make it so you could play like little old arcade games while the game was loading. And that's a cool idea that I think nobody's allowed to do it even still, because it's a patent they have. Or an older, more famous one is probably the fact that everyone in the gaming industry's D-pads suck, because Nintendo patented how their like directional pad on the controller works. So everyone has to do different things to them, which means they're not very good. I think that pattern might have finally ran out, actually. But for the longest time in the games industry, everyone else's controllers had really sucky D-pads. It's why the PlayStation one used to have a big hole in the middle and they were all separate buttons and stuff like that, because they weren't allowed to do the Nintendo one. So yeah, it's not a completely new practice, but it still sucks. And I also think it's extra funny that they've patented a game mechanic that they created in a game that was literally just Assassin's Creed but set in Middle Earth with Batman combat. Like the game is just a crock pot of different companies' games and different games by different developers, and they added one thing to it, and then when we own that, you can't use that anymore. We did it, and it's like, just come on, guys, just have a word with yourself. It's not good enough. Anyway, moving on. We are going to have to talk
things that are not good enough.
Well, we've had a lot of news this week about the Mass Effect remasters, which are coming out very soon now. They're coming out in May. And this looks like it's shaping up pretty good. I think they're doing more to these games than people expected them to, which is a good sign. So yeah, just a quick recap then. Obviously, they're doing a lot of visual improvements for starters. These games look a hell of a lot better. There's a bunch of comparison screenshots you can find online now at most of the big games websites, and it clearly looks like a new game from a new generation of consoles. You could definitely argue it's maybe lost a bit of its personality in the transition, though. I think a lot of the scenes where they used to be like really oversaturated, heavy colors, and kind of, there's one in particular where it's looking up at this Reaper, which is a big enemy from the series, and it's all red and dark and brooding. And then in the new shot, it's all just really like squeaky clean, because it looks really nice and technically, but doesn't necessarily look like the same game. So visual improvements, but maybe there's questions to be asked of if the direction is quite right for it. But then as well as that, there is a bunch of improvements coming to Mass Effect 1. It sounds like they're definitely aiming to bring Mass Effect 1's gameplay more in line with the sequels. For those who don't know, Mass Effect 1 it's much more of an RPG. Like, they're all RPGs, but the combat in 2 and 3 plays out more like a third-person shooter, and the combat in the first one is very much slower and clunkier than that, and it has an atrocious cover system in the original release as well. So, because it came just at the origin of everyone needing to do cover systems, and they just weren't ready for it, whereas that got fixed up a lot in the sequels. So I think that's a good move, bringing Mass Effect 1 in line with the sequels. I think that's just going to make it much more palatable for new players coming in. So that's really good stuff. They've also made it so that the character creator is now universal for all 3 games, which is just a very simple, common sense thing to do. So, you create your character at the start of Mass Effect 1 and you carry that character through all the games now, rather than needing to, create a new character in the other games that looks a little bit different because they've changed the character creator. That's definitely a good idea. Yes, all good stuff. I'm quite looking forward to this. I'm probably going to pick this up. I think it's going to be the best way to play through these games once it comes out. I'm definitely curious. I've asked you this before, but I do wonder if you're gonna, you're gonna drop money on this to play them in this way, or are you gonna just download the EA player versions to get the completions?
I've kind of switched from I'll just play the old EA games to I'll just wait until this comes into EA Play, even if that's like 2 years from now. I can wait. At this point, I'm happy to wait. It sounds like they're going to fix up a lot of the gameplay issues of Mass Effect 1, which I just thought was janky as heck. They're not going to fix the writing. That's going to be what it is. It's going to be Mass Effect. But, the actual game world itself was well designed enough. And, there's stuff you can do there to make the actual gameplay more enjoyable. So if they can tighten all that up, you could probably get me to the point where I don't despise my time with this game, even though every time I read something, I just go, God, who wrote this? But, nonetheless, it's let's see where they go with it. I might just hold off and wait till it comes to EA Play at this point.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this series. I don't even think it's badly written. So, so I'm definitely different to you on this one. But yeah, I think this is a good it's a good remaster. They haven't gone as far as a remake, but they've gone more than just a HD coat of paint, which I do appreciate quite a lot. There's a couple of quite funny bits actually on this release that are worth talking about. So the first one is that the games come with all the DLC from all the games, which is obviously, why wouldn't they? But that's really great. Except for Mass Effect 1 doesn't come with one piece of DLC, which was a super. It wasn't a substantial piece of DLC. It was just this side content where you could go to this kind of arena and fight waves of enemies. Apparently, it was made by an outsourced studio. Like BioWare didn't make it themselves; they got someone else to make it, and it was just this cheap piece of DLC. Anyway, that's not included because apparently the source code is corrupt and they literally cannot recover it. So if they were going to put that in the game, they would have had to just completely remake that entire section of the game from nothing. And they said that like the timescale for this release just wasn't going to be permittable to do that. And you're missing nothing for anyone who hasn't played these games yet. Like, it was called Pinnacle Station. It came out at like 400 Microsoft points, which was about £3 back in the day, and it's nothing. You're not going to care that it's gone, but it's still quite funny that a company as big as this has just irreparably lost some of its code for a game. So that's pretty rough. And the second story, which is the one that's got a lot of attention this week, is that they were talking to Casey Hudson, who is the kind of lead on this and was also working heavily on the originals, and he's talking about how they've altered some camera shots to kind of cut out like gratuitous shots of a particular character's butt. So in Mass Effect 2, there's a woman called Miranda, and it kind of ties into her storyline. I haven't played Mass Effect 2 in about a decade now, but she's kind of engineered to be this like perfect, like she's meant to like, look perfect, act perfect. Like she's meant to be like this beautiful woman anyway. And so, it's a part of her story that she's meant to, have a great butt. But then they do this thing where there's and like the internet's obviously going crazy with this, being like, oh, they're censoring the game. I've cancelled my pre-order. But what they've actually done is there was certain scenes, like scripted cutscenes, where, and the one in particular they're highlighting is one where she's talking about issues she has with her family, and it's a deep, serious storyline, and they're talking about it in a very serious manner. And there's a point where the camera just cuts to like her ass takes up about 60% of the screen. And then you can just see your character just off to the side. And the camera just focuses on her butt for like just for most of that part of the scene for literally no reason other than that some developers at the time it got made thought it's a good butt, let's just put it right front and center in this cutscene. And yeah, so anyway, Casey Hudson did an interview where he called out that one as an example, and he said like they watched it back as they were making this re-release, and he was like, why is the camera sat there like that? And no one had a good sensible answer. So he's like, right, let's just bring the camera up, bring it up to face level. Why would we be just showing a butt in this scene? It's a serious scene. So, makes perfect sense. It's a completely sensible, correct decision to change that. But now the internet's angry because they feel like, the game's taken this butt away from them. And it's like, the butt's still there. If you want to follow the character around outside of that and just lech around looking at her ass all day, it's still the same ass. It's still there. It looks exactly the same. You can do whatever you want. Just in this one scene where she's talking about a family, the camera doesn't stare at her ass. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And yet we're all calling censorship. So pretty funny, has to be said.
Sounds like those people would rather be playing a game called Ass Effect because that will affect their ass. But nonetheless, I guess that's not going to have to happen for them now. Wonderful example of a Mass Effect subtlety, though, right there. And the reason why I think it's a piece of trash is they did that sort of thing all the time. Just dodgy, sexualized writing like it was written by a horny teenager, which is the way most people played it, which is why they like it. You play it now, it's so clunky and so... Yeah. But nonetheless, I guess they've noticed that finally in 2021. Yeah. Somebody at BioWare's finally decided that women are people. That's good of them. I mean, I thought women
so
were
harsh
people
on a game you've never played.
I played it though.
Wow. This coming from your rare and Mass Effect hatred just knows no bounds. It's ridiculous.
It really doesn't.
But we'll see. Eventually, you'll have to play these games. I might try and replay them at the same time, so I can at least bring my current opinions to them. But I think it's a great series, and I'm definitely looking forward to that remaster. So anyway, moving on. Then we've got more remaster news here, which is from Activision. So Activision had a investors call, kind of earnings report, where they tell all the rich people that they got more rich this year. And they told them that they're going to be making more remasters because the last few they've done, which is like the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, the Spyro Reignited Trilogy, and the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 remakes, they've obviously done super well. So they said there's going to be more coming this year. Now, we don't know what they are yet. So I don't know. I mean, is there anything you think that's in kind of Activision's back catalogue at this point that you really want to see remastered this year, or have they kind of hit all the highlights for you?
That's the thing. They say they're going to do more remasters, and I imagine it'll be Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and maybe some of the later Crash games, even though they're not really that great. But, I mean, looking through their back catalogue, there's not much else I would say is fit for a remaster. There's a few things like True Crime Streets of LA was kind of like a half-decent GTA knockoff back in 2005. They did Prototype, which was a half-decent Infamous knockoff back in, 2010. But the only game I saw which really leaped out to me as definitely needs a remaster was Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, which came out at the start of 2000. And that game's great. So I would definitely take some Buzz Lightyear of Star Command as the Activision remaster of choice. It will not happen. Nobody get excited. But that would be my pick if they was to ask me to remaster an old Activision game.
I mean, that's entirely fair. That sounds good to me. I mean, I think the obvious choice here is probably Tony Hawk's 3 or Tony Hawk's 3 and 4 if they want to double it up again. I think, those are some great games and they'd sell as well as 1 and 2, I think. So that would be a good shout. But beyond that, there's not a ton of options here. I mean, I guess they remastered the Call of Duty 4 campaign at one point, didn't they? And that also did well. So maybe they could go into the back catalogue of Call of Duties. I mean, I wouldn't have any interest in that, it has to be said. It's not for me. We've covered this on the show recently, but old shooters feel old. It's the simple sentiment.
Yes.
You play an old FPS, it feels old. Putting a HD coat of paint on it is probably not going to fix it. So I don't massively need that. An amazing thing I've noticed since I had a cheeky look at a list of Activision releases. A game I've already spoke about on today's show is an Activision release, which is PlayStation 1 title, The Weakest Link. So let's definitely remaster The Weakest Link. Just use the same questions from back then. Just get a good HD coat of paint on that thing, and we'll quiz away. Or a bit of Simpsons wrestling, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, I hope that they, even though they're making good money out of these remasters, I think they are on borrowed time with them. They can get a couple more out there that will sell as well as the last few, but then they've kind of spent their load at that point. I think I don't think there's anything else that's going to be good enough to make that work. So we'll see.
I mean, they could remaster Blur, but Blur tanked on release. And as much as I would love to replay Blur in 4K, 60 frames per second, I don't think they're going to send it out to die a second time. Though if it did lead to the recreation of Bizarre Creations, that would be my dream. Can we somehow resurrect that dev team from Activision's cellar and just put them back to work on remastering like Geometry Wars or something? Because I think they had work to do with that. But nonetheless, I think we'll be seeing some THPS 3 and 4. And after that, I really just don't see what else they can do, because nobody wants to play Crash Bandicoot, The Wrath of Cortex, apart from to maybe finally cut those loading screens down from 120 seconds to 2.
Yeah,
that'll be nice.
Maybe if Tony Hawk's 3 and 4 do well, they'll branch out and do those. Because they started doing different sports, didn't they? And nobody cared. So maybe we'll get like Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer, Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX remastered. Just do all of the extreme sports, because
maybe they'll bring the ride board back. Just try again.
Well, we will see anyway. Right, we have a third news story, which is also about remasters here. So Prince of Persia, they were doing a remaster of The Sands of Time, which is, one of the more well-received titles in the series. And I remember, you in particular were quite offended by what they'd made the prince look like in this game. Now, this is apparently delayed indefinitely. So I don't know if, maybe that brief bit of this we saw before was actually a true look at the quality of the release, because it's not even been, there's no time frame on this. They've just said it's delayed. So that's worrying signs for it. But maybe they'll make it look a little bit better now.
I have no idea how you mess up a remaster of one of the greatest platform games of that generation this badly. Like, it only needs a coat of paint. The gameplay is flawless. You don't even need to do anything to it. It will all be fine nowadays. And yet they've ruined the character models, and the animation design is so bad from that opening trailer we saw. So I don't know what they've been doing all this time. But probably the right decision to postpone this indefinitely. I'd maybe just think of putting a different dev team on it, because I don't know how you can come at this so off. I don't even know how it's possible to mess up what should be a surefire hit run like this. I have no idea how this has happened. It's a mad story that it's got to this point. Yeah,
it's a very confusing one. I don't know if they because obviously Ubisoft haven't really went to the well of remasters so much yet. They've not been quite as remaster greedy as maybe some of these other companies, but I don't know if they just heavily underestimated the actual development input it takes to put a remaster together. Like, I don't know if they just miscalculated and had, too small of a team, too tight a budget for it. I don't know, but it seemed wrong from arrival, really, didn't it? As soon as we heard about it, it was a bit off. And at this point, I wonder if it's even, is it even something that they're going to get around to anytime soon, or are they just going to hope people forget, to be honest?
They might just shelve it quietly at this point, to be fair. I mean, it's what they've done with the Prince of Persia franchise for the best part of 8 years anyway. So it doesn't really make a radical difference.
It's true. Yeah, they made that one genuinely great game that was kind of cel-shaded, and then went, nah, that'll do now. We're done. Let's just leave it here. I was hoping that one was getting remastered. I think that game's great.
That game is great. They're probably going to bring it back in 6 or 8 months' time. And all of a sudden, the prince will be climbing watchtowers and clearing out bases. And they'll go, guys, we fixed it. We made it into the game you always wanted.
We're going to release it this holiday season around 8 other games that are also that game. Enjoy.
So look forward to that.
Yep, that'll be nice. So, okay, then, right, one final item for this week. This is a quote from, we've already talked about him this week, but Akira Yamaoka, the composer from Silent Hill and the composer from Shadows of the Damned. It seems like he's basically leaked that another Silent Hill is happening. And because people have been clamoring for Silent Hill games for the longest time, and obviously, it just didn't seem like it was ever going to happen. But yeah, he was doing an interview with someone, and he mentioned he teased that he was working on some new projects, and he mentioned that something's going to be announced around this summertime. And he said to the interviewer, I think it's the one you're all hoping to hear about, which definitely sounds like Silent Hill. And then also apparently that clip has now been asked to be removed. So the people who did the interview have now had to remove that clip. Obviously, the internet remembers everything, so we're all still aware of it. If anything, they've made it more obvious by making these people delete it. But yeah, I mean, this all signs point to Silent Hill, right? Surely.
It's got to be that, doesn't it? It just has to be. I mean, I would love if it's Shadow of the Damned too. I'd just laugh and laugh for the best part of 24 hours if it's some naff game that nobody cares about, or better yet, it's just a really high-def pachinko machine. But
they do love pachinko. They do. Oh.
They love them. So it might just be a mobile game, knowing Konami, but let's wait and see. But that rumor has been swirling about for so long that it's kind of gone beyond wishful thinking. Surely there's some level of truth there. I mean, maybe there isn't. Maybe it is just another pachinko machine. And part of me hopes it is, because that would be hilarious. But, I think we can start bracing for a new Silent Hill, which, if it's anything like the past 5 Silent Hill games, will be crap. But
I mean, the early games in that series were very good for their time.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly Silent Hill. I remember Silent Hill 2 was that a PS2 game? It was, right?
Oh,
that one was some good stuff. I hear the remaster is total trash. So if anyone's listening to this and sees that there's a version of it released on 360 and PS3, just move along. Pretend it's not there. Apparently they completely butchered that remaster, so you don't want that. But nonetheless, it's a huge series and it really is long overdue a game. So hopefully we'll get one. We'll definitely keep up to date with that, and if it's announced, you'll hear about it here. That's for sure.
Yeah, let's live in hope. Play 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're great. Maybe skip the rest. They weren't great. Apart from that Wii game, Shattered Memories, that was all right. That was playable.
I remember that being all right.
Yeah,
that's fair.
That was okay. Other than that, nah.
Yeah. Right then, well, that is pretty much all the news this week. I'm just going to chime back in with one thing, because I've just noticed it on my other screen. So we were talking earlier about those awful other extreme sports titles from Activision, and I thought the worst one was Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer. Nope, I think it was Wakeboarding Unleashed featuring Sean Murray. Please, God, let's bring that back. Wow. Anyway,
please.
So
the campaign starts here.
Right, well, that is the end of the news this week and the end of the show. So if you want to catch us on social media, you can find us at Beat the Sheet on Twitter. We're always usually posting there about the new titles coming to Game Pass, the Leaving Soon titles, all that kind of stuff. So it's a good place to hear about those first. If you want to drop us an email, you can find us at beatthesheetpodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to email us about anything you like, really. Whatever you're currently playing, or some thoughts and feedback on the show. It's all good stuff. We're always happy to hear from our listeners. And if you could drop us a 5-star review on your podcast platform, or give us a thumbs up on the YouTube video if you're catching us through there, that would also be really helpful. That really helps us get the word out about the show. So yeah, thanks a lot. Until next time, I'm Andy Wood, and I am on 65% completion on the sheet still at the moment, which, it's not bad. I'm fairly happy with that.
And my name is Josh Stevenson, and I've made myself up to 54% of the sheet. And more importantly, I have finally got to where I was before EA Play ruined my life. And I now just have 200 games to beat. Anybody can beat 200 games, right? That's easy.
Just an easy 200. That's fine. Easy. It's not like they had about 5 in every week. It's fine. It's 200. That's no problem.
It'll go by like that.
Yeah. In fairness, that's some effort. We're in February now. EA Play got added in November, so to recover the lost ground in only about 4 months that's commendable. You've worked hard there. Very, very well done.
That's what some 2 a.m. Plants vs. Zombies does for you. Look forward to a review on that on a later show. Spoilers, It's better than Peggle. Oh my God.
Oh, bold move. Cannot wait to talk about that one. I'm also playing Plants vs. Zombies right now because we are broken men. So when I finish that, we will review it on the show for sure. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening, everyone. And we'll catch you next week.
Goodbye.